In the lonely port of Carpathia, shrouded in thick fog and the distant sound of waves crashing against the pier, the merchant ship Demeter was anchored. The night was dark, only partially lit by the few oil lanterns, casting unsettling shadows across the docks. The crew was busy, moving silently as they carried the mysterious cargo of 50 unmarked wooden crates. Each crate looked identical, hermetically sealed, exuding a sense of unease that many of the sailors could not ignore. The captain of the Demeter, a robust man with a face marked by time and the sea, watched the operation with a serious expression. He had accepted the contract without questioning the nature of the cargo, somewhat skeptical about local stories of superstition and mystery. However, something about this particular load made him uncomfortable. Perhaps it was the silence of the porters, or the murmurs he occasionally caught on the wind, whispering of unseen dangers and ancient curses. The sailors, hardened by years of sailing, began to exchange suspicious glances. There was something ominous in the air that night, a feeling that they were embarking on a journey that would not bode well. When the last crate was finally stored in the ship's hold, an uneasy silence descended on the crew. Even the most skeptical among them couldn't help but feel a shiver run down their spines. As the Demeter prepared to depart, the full moon rose in the sky, casting a pale light on the ship. The captain gave the order, and slowly, the Demeter began to move away from the port. As the sails were raised and the ship gained speed, the sound of the waves and the wind blowing through the sails could not dispel the feeling of oppression that enveloped the deck. In the first days of the trip, the crew tried to maintain a normal routine. They laughed and talked during meals, trying to shake off dark thoughts. However, it wasn't long before small, inexplicable events began to occur. Objects mysteriously disappeared, whispering voices were heard in the dead of night, and strange shadows seemed to dance in the corners of sailors' eyes. The first clear sign that something was terribly wrong came with the disappearance of one of the crew. He had last been seen near the basement, where the crates were stored. The frantic search that followed was fruitless. He seemed to have disappeared into thin air, leaving only an unsettling silence in his place. The crew began to murmur about the crates, questioning what they really contained and why they seemed to emanate such an evil presence. The captain tried to maintain calm among his men, but he himself was increasingly restless. He knew he needed to uncover the truth about the cargo before more tragedies occurred. He decided to go down to the basement and investigate the crates himself, armed with a flashlight and a growing sense of dread. When he opened one of the crates, he found something that defied all logic and understanding: earth, nothing but earth that exuded an odor of death and decay. As the Demeter continued its journey towards London, the tension on board increased every day. What initially seemed like a routine trip was turning into a living nightmare. The crew, now reduced by fear and loss, were on the verge of paranoia. They knew they were not alone on the ship, that an unholy presence was watching them from the shadows. Demeter's voyage was just beginning, and the real fight for survival was about to unfold. The terror that awaited the crew would soon reveal itself, turning each night into a terrifying confrontation with Dracula himself. And as the ship neared its destination, what remained of the men on board wondered if any of them would ever see the light of day again. The Demeter pulls away from Carpathia harbor, sails puffed by the night wind as she glides through the dark sea water. On board, the crew prepares for the journey to London, anticipation mixed with a sense of uneasiness that seems to hang over the ship like a shadow. As the sailors go about their tasks, a silent tension builds between them, fueled by the presence of the 50 unmarked wooden crates. Each crate seems to pulse with a dark secret, evoking a sense of unease among those carrying them. In the first days of the journey, small strange events begin to occur on board the Demeter. Objects disappear inexplicably, whispering voices disappear. Heard in the depths of the ship at night, and ominous shadows seem to move in the darkest corners of the corridors. Despite the sailors' attempts to ignore these disturbing signs, the tense atmosphere on board the Demeter only increases as the days go by. A sailor mysteriously disappears, leaving behind only a heavy silence and the feeling that something sinister is unfolding in the bowels of the ship. As the journey progresses, the crew begins to wonder about the nature of the wooden crates and what they really contain. Rumors begin to spread, fueling fear and distrust among the sailors as they wonder if they are alone on the ship or if something more sinister is lurking. As the days pass aboard the Demeter, signs of the evil around them become increasingly evident. Unexplained disappearances and suspicious deaths among the crew add to the sense of terror that permeates the merchant ship. The crew, alarmed by the disturbing events, begins to investigate the mysterious shipment of wooden crates. One of the sailors, driven by curiosity and growing fear, decides to explore the ship's hold, where the crates are stored. There, he discovers an open crate, revealing its macabre contents, damp earth and an odor of decay that fills the air. The shocking discovery further increases paranoia among the crew, who are now convinced that something terrible is happening aboard the Demeter. Rumors about the true nature of the cargo spread quickly, fueling fear and distrust among sailors. Meanwhile, disappearances and deaths continue, leaving survivors increasingly isolated and terrified. The bodies found show signs of exsanguination, suggesting that something supernatural is lurking in the ship's shadows. The evil presence aboard the Demeter manifests itself more directly, haunting sailors with horrific and frightening visions. Desperation grips the crew, who now face an enemy that cannot be seen or understood. With the terror aboard the Demeter reaching unprecedented levels, the crew finds themselves in a desperate fight for survival. The disappearances and deaths continue, leaving the remaining sailors in a state of pure panic and despair. Desperate to find a way to stop the supernatural threat that surrounds them, the survivors resort to every weapon and defense available. They arm themselves with wooden stakes, erect crucifixes, and invoke protective rituals in a desperate attempt to ward off the evil that haunts them. However, their efforts seem in vain given the magnitude of the terror they face. Dracula, the immortal vampire behind the horrors aboard the Demeter, continues to hunt the crew relentlessly, feeding on their lives and instilling the deepest fear in their hearts. Direct confrontations with Dracula become increasingly frequent and bloody, leaving the survivors in a state of constant terror. With each encounter, they find themselves fighting for their lives against an enemy that seems invincible. As the Demeter continues its voyage towards London, fear and distrust spread among the remaining sailors. They know they are not alone on the ship, that an unholy presence watches them from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the Demeter approaches London, the tension on board reaches its peak. The remaining surviving crew prepare for the final confrontation with Dracula, knowing that the coming battle will determine their fate. Armed with stakes, crucifixes and courage, the sailors prepare to face the immortal vampire. They know the fight will be brutal and bloody, but they are determined to fight to the end for their survival. When Dracula finally reveals himself, the sailors rush at him with ferocity, delivering desperate blows in the hope of defeating the evil that haunts them. The battle is fierce, with blood being spilled and bodies falling to the ground. However, Dracula is a formidable opponent, with powers beyond human comprehension. He fights with supernatural dexterity, dodging the sailors' attacks and slashing them with his sharp fangs. Despite the heroic efforts of the survivors, it seems they are destined to lose the battle. Dracula is relentless in his quest for domination, and the sailors are fighting a battle they cannot win. In a moment of desperation, one of the sailors has a bold idea. He sacrifices himself, using his own body as bait to lure Dracula into a deadly trap. The plan works, and Dracula is temporarily incapacitated. Seizing the opportunity, the survivors unite to deliver the final blow against Dracula. With a wooden stake driven through his heart, the immortal vampire is finally defeated, disintegrating into dust before the shocked eyes of the sailors. Exhausted and injured, the survivors look around, contemplating the terrible price they paid for their survival. The Demeter, now free from the evil that haunted her, continues her journey towards London, her masts raised as a symbol of triumph over the darkness. As the Demeter approaches London Harbor, the remaining survivors contemplate the horrific events they witnessed aboard the merchant ship. They bear the physical and emotional scars of the battle against Dracula, a fight that cost many lives and left a trail of destruction in its wake. As the sun rises over the horizon, Casting a pale light over the Demeter's deck, sailors gather to pay tribute to their fallen comrades. They know they will never forget the friends lost to the supernatural evil that haunted them throughout the trip. Meanwhile, the captain of the Demeter examines the wreckage of the ship, reflecting on the events that brought him to the brink. He knows that the journey is far from over and that the terror they faced aboard the Demeter has left an indelible mark on their souls. As the Demeter docks in London Harbor, the survivors prepare to face the uncertain future that awaits them. They know they will never be the same after what they went through aboard the merchant ship, but they also know that they survived the worst the supernatural world had to offer. As the Demeter unloads its cursed cargo and the survivors step aside to start their lives over, one thing is certain: they will never forget the cursed journey that took them to the edge of sanity and confronted them with evil in its purest form. And so, Demeter goes on other adventures, leaving behind the nightmare that haunted him for so long. But the memories of the battle against Dracula and the terror they faced aboard the merchant ship will remain vivid in their minds forever.